Parts of the United States experienced record heat this summer. Places like Phoenix saw temperatures in excess of 110 degrees for 30 days straight. More signs that our planet is getting warmer. Hello, you're watching Health Day now. I'm Mabel Jong. This year we saw record temperatures all over the world, leading to extreme weather events ending in devastation and harm to human health. Climatologist Adam Smith is here. Adam's with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. He's the lead scientist for the Weather and Disasters Program. Adam, what's causing the severe weather in parts of the country?
In recent years, we have seen that our vulnerability and our exposure to different weather and climate extremes has been increasing. And there has been different regional factors and different extremes that impact populations and economies. So, for example, we're seeing more extremes that occur back to back. For example, as we can recall in recent years, the western United States has been in historic drought conditions that have lengthened wildfire seasons. And but sometimes those wildfire seasons and drought conditions are punctuated by extreme heavy rainfall, like the historic flooding that California experienced early this year. So it's kind of a weather whiplash effect. But we're seeing other extremes, such as in recent years, Florida, where Louisiana has been impacted by numerous destructive hurricanes. So that makes the recovery process more costly, more difficult, both physically and socioeconomically. So the vulnerability to drought in the West, the lengthening wildfire seasons in the West, also the flooding that we are seeing in the central and eastern U.S. as the atmosphere holds more water vapor, it can produce more rainfall. And of course, sea level rise along the Gulf and the Atlantic is also enhancing storm surge flooding from hurricane events. So there are a lot of different facets of how weather and climate extremes are influenced and enhanced by climate change.
According to the Harris poll in partnership with HealthDay, about 3 in 5 U.S. adults say they're concerned about the air quality, the pollution that's connected to the changing weather events in the area where they live. Adam, how is severe weather impacting the air people are breathing?
Yeah, so over the last half decade or more, the western U.S. has had historic wildfire seasons that then produce very unhealthy smoke conditions for weeks or months on end. And certainly this is bad for local economies, outdoor recreation, but of course human health, mental and physical well-being. And just this year, the East Coast of the United States has experienced kind of what the West Coast has in recent years. The historic Canadian wildfire season has really pushed smoke south to us across the eastern United States several times throughout the year so far. You can remember the orange skies over New York City, and it really brings to bear how a changing climate and these extremes do have impacts on everyone. They just change over space and time and intensity.
A new NOAA report was recently released on the U.S. disaster cost, frequency, and impacts. What are some key findings?
Yeah, so for the first 7 months of this year, we've actually had 15 separate weather or climate-related extremes that have been, in today's dollars, $1 billion or more of damage. And unfortunately, that's the highest count, 15 events over 7 months, than any year on record. Over the last 7 complete years, these billion-dollar weather and climate disasters have actually inflicted more than $1 trillion of damage to the United States and over 5,000 fatalities, which are both records.
After a heat wave scorching parts of the United States, how does prolonged exposure to extremely high temperatures affect human health, particularly in vulnerable populations like the elderly and children? And not just the heat. In the Northeast, people saw a blanket of smoke hovering over communities due to the enormous wildfires in Canada. Dr. Christopher Lemon is an assistant professor of emergency medicine at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. Dr. Lemon, so great to see you.
Oh, happy to be here. This is such an important topic. Thanks for having me.
What are the potential health implications for people exposed to pollutants in the air?
When it comes to air pollution, there are different types of air pollution, but unfortunately, all of these seem to be exacerbated by climate change. There's what we typically think of in terms of forest fires and debris and ash, but there's also other issues to consider as well, like smog. As you have increased heat, you can have these other chemical reactions occurring at a ground level that also cause increased air pollution. And unfortunately, these sort of problems affect more than just the lungs in terms of breathing. They can affect the cardiovascular system, leading to strokes and heart disease, as well as reactive airway problems for those who have asthma and COPD. So unfortunately, there are lots of different ways that this is going to affect our populations.
The Harris poll, in partnership with HealthDay, shows that about 3 in 5 are concerned their child may experience difficulties with concentration, learning, and memory, which can affect how they do in school. The poll also found that 1 in 4 skipped or changed their exercise regimen to avoid going outside. Dr. Lemon, with so many hesitating to even exercise outside due to the poor air quality, how else can extreme weather conditions impact health, and could this be a chronic problem?
When you talk about extreme weather, this is more than just these small exposures over and over again. You have to think about the large disruptive effects of this. If you're going to school in a place that's burned out by a wildfire or flooded, and this happens every few years, you can imagine what COVID did to our kids in terms of their ability to learn, concentrate, and their mental health. And unfortunately, these extreme weather events and climate change are going to have very similar effects.
What about mental health? Is thinking about climate change a significant stressor in people's lives?
Climate change, unfortunately, is going to make a lot of these mental health conditions worse. And that's not only for people who have pre-diagnosed concerns regarding anxiety, depression, but also people who previously didn't. When you're living in the context of this sense of constant doom and no hope for the future and all these things that you hear about how bad climate change may be, it really is impactful not only on the general population, but especially our kids.
If you or members of your family already experience specific respiratory issues, should you think very carefully about where you live?
While I don't want to be extreme in terms of telling everybody that they need to get up and move, I do think it's something to consider long term, especially if you or your family members may have underlying health conditions that could be particularly affected by the local climate that you're evolving into right now. Certainly it's something where people should be cognizant of this, but also take control as much as they can. There's a lot that can be done at a local level to try to adapt your infrastructure and your communities to handle some of these changes.
Dr. Christopher Lemon, Assistant Professor of Emergency Medicine at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for the time.
Back to you, Adam. How can people keep themselves safe from these extreme weather events?
Well, historically in the United States, heat, flooding, hurricanes, these destructive wildfires, particularly in the West, have been trends that are going in the wrong direction. They're becoming more damaging in terms of economic cost, influencing larger areas of populations and economic regions. So those are drivers of illness, injury, and unfortunately fatalities as well. But also we have more weather-focused tornado outbreaks, hail and high wind events, which has really driven many of the extremes so far we've experienced in 2023. But of course, wildfire season and hurricane season is still yet to come. And so the upshot is that, these extremes are, impactful to our homes, our businesses, to natural resources, to crops and agriculture, and of course drive a lot of damage to our mental and physical well-being if we're not prepared for those. For example, we know that heat-related illness and death are largely preventable, and proper planning and action can mitigate lost lives or injuries. In many urban areas, they have cooling centers for people who are they don't have the resources to protect themselves. Just like we see along the coast, people continue to move to coastal areas because the quality of life is desirable there until hurricanes comes through. So as a combination of exposure plus vulnerability plus climate change and people's own choices to move at different places. So all that together is kind of why we are where we are. It's going to be challenging to better mitigate ourselves from these increasing extremes in costs and impacts.
How much further can temperatures rise? Will there be parts of the U.S. where people just can't live anymore?
Yeah, unfortunately for certain parts of the world, U.S. Southwest being one of them, statistically is much more likely to have more heat waves, longer duration, more intense heat waves. We're learning from the past to better prepare for the future. One of the key issues is that the future seems to be accelerating a bit faster than the past would lead us to understand and learn from. So it's going to require a lot of innovation, a lot of learning, a lot of communication, and of course, responsibility to try to mitigate for yourself, for your loved ones, for your business, for society at large.
Climatologist Adam Smith, lead scientist for the Weather and Disasters Program at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Mabel Jong. You've been watching Health Day Now.